Welcome back to Movement Needs Therapy, the podcast at the intersection of creative arts and body and healing. I'm Rebecca, and in this episode, whether you're a clinician, a curious mind, or someone on your own healing journey, welcome. There's something that happens when the body speaks and we actually listen. Here, I am talking to Atara today. Atara is a drama therapist and a very soulful individual. She runs the Zion Inn. She works in New York City and globally as a trauma-informed practitioner. And this episode is all about meeting yourself where you are in all of your complexities. And it's not just talking in this podcast. It's embodiment. We're embodying how we create safety, or how someone could give themselves a hug after a workout class, as a body, soul embodied individual. Where do you feel like movement or ritual has helped you ground lately? Is it somewhere like a workout class, or watching one online virtually, and being proud of yourself for executing something creative and something beautiful? Get comfy, get a drink, some water. It's starting to heat up in New York over here. And let's dive in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Movement Needs Therapy, podcast about creative arts psychotherapy. I am so happy to be joined by my friend and colleague, Atara Vogelstein. Atara is a licensed creative arts therapist and drama therapist based in New York. She provides trauma-informed and body-centered psychotherapy to individuals and groups of varying ages, with specialties including trauma and attachment, stress and anxiety, emotional and behavioral regulation, and self-esteem and empowerment. In the wake of October 7th, Atara has devoted a meaningful portion of her work to creating Jewish and Israeli healing spaces, holding grief, collective trauma, and resilience for our community, navigating an unprecedented time. Her work lives at the intersection of art and healing, where the body, story, and spirit are all welcomed in the room. Atara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Rebecca, and for such a beautiful, warm intro. That was so sweet.
Hey. So, what drew you to drama therapy first, for those of us curious about that?
Yeah. So, drama therapy manifested in my world as an undergrad at NYU. I was really interested in investigating, as you said, the intersections between art and healing and various social and communal and interfaith, interdialogue applications of theater and the arts in particular. And it was through this course of study that a friend recommended a course called Creative Arts in the Helping Professions. And this was my first introduction into the creative arts therapies, and drama therapy in particular really spoke to me. I am a very kind of sensory, imaginative, embodied, inquisitive person by nature, and drama therapy holds all of these parts. And it felt like a real calling once I discovered that it exists and that I could work with people in a meaningful way where there could be the possibility for social impact, and also draw on certain elements of my own persona and tendencies in a way that went beyond myself.
Yes, I definitely resonate with that, going from dancing to choreographing and taking up more space as a student, and then finding the dance movement therapy field. Did you have artists or performers that you really looked up to during this time in your life when you found this work?
This is such a good question. So actually at this time, I think my artistic inspiration was coming more from poetry and poetic writing. I was taking some courses at the same time in creative nonfiction and experimental poetry. And also as a student in New York, I was taking more dance classes around the city. And so discovering new forms of dance like West African and Latin movement. And so I could, take a closer look at who exactly was speaking that time, but I think it was the broader creative, artistic, kind of soulful world that I was feeling. And it was really calling to my own artistic spirit in this fused way. And I also really related and still do really connect with exactly what you're describing, that so much of African dance is based in rooting the feet, rooting the body, and kind of feeling the movement from the ground up. And it also feels like a practice of gratitude to the earth and a calling in of community and communal strength. And there's so much ritual in that connection to both the ground, yourself, and other. Yeah. Where were you taking African dance or I guess other dance?
Yeah, Avenel.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love Ailey. I was also spending a lot of time at Ailey and Perry Dance downtown at Union Square. Those were my first kind of windows into the world of African dance and then some other forms as well.
So when we met in September 2022,
Mm.
the Kint Institute trauma certification for the arts. And I remember that was such a pivotal training for me because I was finally immersed with other creative arts therapists in this body of trauma research, and the experts that were our trainers, our mentors that were there with us. It was just so, and how we all were sitting on the floor all the time. Like it just felt like grad school 2.0, but with other modalities. Did you find that similar excitement and like flutter of butterflies? We're all in that room together.
Mm. I felt really grounded, I think, in that time and space. I felt like there was a real sense of care among our cohort and among the
Yeah.
facilitators that challenged me and asked me to step into a more grounded, kind of elevated way of being at the same time. And I think a lot of that had to do with being in a space where that was invited and where there was so much kind of simmering and the desire for all of us to be there. There was a willingness. And I think it was the willingness on part of all of the individuals in the space that made it feel like, even if this is hard, even if this is challenging, even though I'm going through my own personal, interpersonal traumas and losses simultaneously, I can be here and do this as a human and as a clinician.
Anything you want to share about that? Anything that feels new or exciting in the research?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I mean, there's so much in there, and the Kint Institute really does an exceptional job of inviting that complexity throughout the different investigations into how trauma exists, forms, operates in the world, and how we can navigate that clinically. And also, taking our own experience as the psychotherapist, as the creative arts therapist, as the trauma specialist, the impact that the work has on us into account as well, and really highlights that relational dynamic, which to me is at the heart of trauma work, reorienting relational dynamics and establishing greater trust and safety slowly, little by little. It really is one step at a time. I'm sure you recall Amber Gray, a really impressive and experienced dance movement therapist who's one of the founders of the Kint training. I think it was their first Friday evening together where she invited us as a cohort to shift to a place of comfort. And that was such a simple, basic invitation and has stuck with me since. And it's something that I invite my clients, groups that I facilitate, remind myself to listen to. And when we're able to have that moment, even of small awareness, that I can shift how I'm holding myself right now, I can regulate my body or my emotional experience. She also said, in order to shift our emotional state, we have to shift our physiological state. And I mean, as a dance movement therapist, I know you know that to be true. And as a drama therapist, I know that to be true, whether it's through sculpting our body intentionally through a dramatic posture, um, a message neurologically to ourselves. I feel a different way, or I can feel a different way, or giving greater expression to that sensation. Micro movements and those macro movements, small and large, can be so effective. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my memory of you, I mean, I can believe it was 2022 already, but just being so brave to take up space in your movements and your risk taking, because it was always, for me, it always felt like it was coming from such a place of heart-centered care, how you show up as a therapist. Yeah, I still feel that till this day. That's how I think of you. That's how I feel you. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Totally. I don't know if it's because 'cause we're both dancers too, so I just feel
Yeah, I
that.
feel the same in you. I remember you leading with vulnerability in a way that was strong. You really struck me as someone who can be strong in your vulnerability by allowing others to witness you in it and connect through the hardest of times, even grief. And I remember a particular moment that we shared as we were just starting the program and getting to know each other, where I had shared a piece of vulnerability of my own journey through grief and interpersonal trauma. And you took a moment, took me aside to let me know that you could connect to some of what I shared. And I felt really seen by you. And I think that might have been maybe the beginning of our friendship, where I just saw you as someone who, you went out of your way to tell me, I know what you're going through and I know how hard that is. And if you need anything, I'm here. And it meant so much. And that's, I think really why our connection is so strong, because we can see each other in these heartfelt ways and be really sensitive to each other's experiences and connect through a lot of shared kind of tendencies, like in our work and in social spheres that we both exist within. Um, and also why places like the Kint experience have been so impactful for me, because of this acknowledgement that you are a therapist and you're human. And as far as you can go with your client is only as far as you can go with yourself. And so emphasizing, how important it is for us to be resourced as clinicians, to have domains of support for ourselves, and to know what it takes to move through trauma, to move through pain, to move through grief, and really show up authentically for our clients and build that trusting relationship.
Yeah. For those who are listening, I know I'm curious too, because you're also a dance teacher. You're also a dance, like a fitness dance instructor in the city. So how do you find those two worlds coexisting, to be a therapist and then also a teacher?
And I'm so grateful that I get to do both, to be an embodied practitioner as a therapist, and then to also get to be free in a different way through dance fitness and dance instruction, and also as a student of dance. To move freely is such an integral aspect of how I engage with my own experiences, and have found a lot of healing moving my own experiences through them so that they become less stuck. And I actually feel that my experience as a dance instructor has only strengthened my work as a therapist, especially as far as group dynamics and slowing down at times, reacting, connecting with the energy of the group or of the others in the space, modifying in different ways. Of course, this shows up differently in the therapeutic encounter than it does in the dance studio. But there is a lot of overlap. Um, sensing others' energy and connecting with others. Most people who show up to a dance fitness class are showing up because they want to sweat, they want to relieve stress, they want to feel good. um, they want to perhaps disconnect from their lives in the outside world, have a little bit of escapism, feel uplifted by someone else. So much of that is true for therapy work as well. I guess the difference is that even though a lot of that can be true of the therapeutic space, we're also being a lot more intentional about how and when we're giving breath to that moment of feeling perhaps uplifted or joined, and slowing down enough to also be able to go into the depth and the harder, heavier spaces. And then there are also really specific moments where I think what people sense in me, perhaps in the dance class, is because of my work as a therapist, like someone who comes to my class every week. And then if I have time and they have something really weighing on them, there were times where I just sat with them after class and gave them space to share what was going on with them, knowing I'm not their therapist, knowing that this isn't a paid session, knowing that I want to connect them with the resources they need for their own therapy, but even with them as a human that they feel connected with. So yeah,
So
there's a lot of personality there.
so important, and I've said this in my life many times, but How great is it to be able to talk to your dance teacher at the end of class and feel like, I mean, this hasn't always happened, right? This doesn't always fly with every teacher. It could actually even be more traumatizing to dance. And this has happened to me because I grew up in pretty rigid, structured dance classes, but not always. But when I would want to talk to the teacher at the end of class about something, it didn't really feel safe to open up. And even though I was just doing the most extreme dance, spreading your body essentially in all these directions, and it does feel like you're stretching every limb, every part of your expression is on display, and you want to be able to say, like, something just moved in my body, there is something there. And then when I found out that dance movement therapy was a real thing, a real field, I thought, okay, dance training could also look so different. And so that's why I'm so happy to hear that you are blending the two in your work too, because the shaking rhythm or the the, the splits or the jumps, and you're moving in a way that's not controlled. You can't control every single thing that happens. If anything, maybe like you can control 20% of what you're doing. To have a therapeutically or informed, trauma trained individual holding that space for you, reflecting back to you, it's okay that you just did all of those things with your body. And was it fun? Was it exciting? Was it emotional? Yeah.
You're making me think about how the fitness industry really needs more trauma informed instruction, because when you're working with people, whether it's in the therapy room or therapist client dyad or group, or as a personal trainer or fitness instructor or a breathwork practitioner, whenever you're working with someone in a position of care where you're charged with leading someone through different movements in their body, so much can arise. And yeah, that's a lot to ask of society, that every personal trainer has trauma informed training, but how much better off we would be if coaches, trainers, breathwork practitioners did have that experience to be able to really care for their clients that aren't necessarily seeking therapy, but are seeking responsible movement guidance in a more holistic, responsible way. I'm reminded of a moment actually after one of my dance classes that I was teaching. This was probably 2 or 3 years ago at this point, but someone had been coming to my class for probably a few weeks, and I always sensed such joy in her when she moved. And I bring a lot of African, Latin, Caribbean, hip hop rhythms into my classes. And especially with the Caribbean movement, I could really sense like she always really lit up and connected with this. And sometimes I close dance classes with, we take a few breaths together and maybe we end with our hands heart center, or just a little shake, or there's a hip movement, and for a while I think closing with the invitation to self hug following the end of class stretch, to, if you want to, give yourself a hug. And I probably said it like, give yourself a hug. You did this, in a very upbeat dance fitness instructor kind of way.
Yeah.
And this one member of this gym where I was teaching came to me at the end, right afterward. She kind of lingered until everyone else had cleared out of the studio, and she was in tears. And she shared with me that moment of giving herself a hug brought up a lot of emotion that she ended up sharing with me was rooted in a lot of interpersonal trauma. And she hadn't given that kind of love to herself in so long. She hadn't felt that internally. And it was such a reminder for me of what you're asking about, Rebecca, this intersection between movement and in the roles that I hold and play, and maintaining that sensitivity to how much can be elicited through movement. It was really a point of reflection for me, even as a dance instructor, not in the role of therapist, but in the role of dance instructor, how much can emerge through the smallest of movement invitations. I always try to open my dance classes with an invitation to listen to your body. If you need to march in place, roll your hips, twerk it out, try not to come to a sudden stop because your heart rate is elevated. It is a cardio-based class, but
Yeah, that's different.
to take care of your body, that you know yourselves and your bodies better than I do. And some of that language is also language that I use in leading therapy groups or, intentional therapeutic spaces. So yeah, you're just getting me thinking about this interplay. It's really important to tend to.
I feel like even in, when I was on the board for the New York American Dance Therapy Association, there would be this kind of ominous feeling of how do we spread the message of dance movement therapy more, and without people thinking that dance is necessarily therapy all the time, because that's not true either. And even my own desire to do therapeutic dance classes, which are different than actual dance therapy classes, and just like all the little semantics and like, walking on eggshells kind of feeling, because you don't want to misrepresent this master's level field. And also, especially with social media right now, it's like there's so many amazing dancers showing their work online. And then there's also therapists who are dancers saying, I love to dance, but I would never bring it into my sessions. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot going on. I don't know if you bring up anything there.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Knowing that everyone has a different relationship to movement, what are cues that you look for when working with a client, especially at the beginning of your therapeutic work together, that gives you the information that you need to feel like I can invite this movement or this intervention here?
Yeah, I love that question. I will oftentimes feel how they're breathing first. I'll notice where they're actually, if they're breathing more shallow, or if they're breathing into their legs and their pelvis, belly area, how they're moving their hands, if they're moving their hands at all, if they're stiff, if they're, maybe they're totally frozen. Then, if they are, in fact, in a functional freeze state, then I would oftentimes like stand more next to them in the space, like in this horizontal space, which is just kind of this safer, more neutral place with them, rather than standing in front of them or behind them. Of course, would never stand behind someone, but just this feeling of equalness. Like this is a neutral. I don't know more than you. You know yourself the best. I don't know. I'm not projecting onto you, or just, I'm looking at them more physiologically, and also looking at their eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much sensing that is happening on a truly embodied and somatic level. And dance movement therapy and drama therapy really share this, since they're both embodied practices. In drama therapy, it's often referred to as joining. So when I mirror a client's posture or perhaps,
Join.
yeah. So like you said, maybe standing beside them. Maybe I'm standing beside them. Maybe I'm facing them. If they're seated, maybe I'm sitting across from them. And in sometimes more subtle ways and sometimes more dramatically exaggerated ways where they know we're doing this on purpose. um,
Yeah.
Sending that message like you're describing, I'm here with you. We're co-creators in this, giving space to play with who leads and who follows, so that that attunement is prioritized, that building of that embodied and somatic rapport, so that I'm fully not moving them in a direction that they're not ready to go in, where their internal experience is not prepped for.
Right.
Prioritizing the relationship between us and that feeling of being safe enough.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of Britton Williams, a brilliant drama therapist who led part of the weekend with Craig Hain, also a brilliant drama therapist, of the Kint training that I actually just did in the second year this past weekend. Kint, just to remind our audience, the Kint Institute that provides postmaster's levels trainings to clinicians to explore trauma through creative arts therapy lens. And I might be paraphrasing, but I wrote this down in my notebook because it struck me. Britton said something along the lines of, oh, now I wish I had the paper in front of me. I know it had to do, we can be afraid without being unsafe. And I think I'm paraphrasing that a bit, and I think that just came to me now and thinking about, how we establish an embodied sense of safety or trust or feeling safe enough with clients, that perhaps it gives room for the client to feel anxious, maybe to feel fear without re-traumatization, without actual unsafety.
Yes. There were so many metaphors. I also wish I had my notebook in front of me now from the training, because it was just so rich with metaphor and just different visualizations we were doing. And I remember you and I also really bonded when there was the mural that we made. I think it was like boundaries. We were painting on a mural on the floor, and forgive me, I forgot the therapist's name who was there that weekend, but
Was it art therapy?
it was art therapy. Yeah.
Magdalena,
hmm
Magdalena.
And I remember, yeah, it was, what was it? Well, it was definitely before October. It was definitely before October 7th. But I remember that there was this, all of a sudden there was this pull happening in our group, um, where there was this tension around like visibility for Palestinian children, I think that she was working with in Israel, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but
My memory of what I think you're describing was a project that the art
Mhm.
therapist was facilitating, perhaps with Amber Gray in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it was
That's
bringing
what it was.
Israeli and Palestinian teenagers. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember there was just this like shaky feeling in the room. I couldn't like put my finger on it, but I don't know. I think everyone knew in the room that you and I were Jewish, but I don't know if um that it for me it always kind of felt like something was unfinished in that conversation. And I felt like that was maybe something we were used to. Okay, we're just going to sweep this under the rug a little bit. We're not going to talk about how it sounded like that work that was happening in that program. There was a little bit of a
Bias.
what? Yeah, bias. There was a bias in that delivery. And, yeah, I think you and I kind of just like looked at each other and were like, okay, there's something a little off here, or just unfinished. Like it didn't feel like it was the full picture, which actually brings me to my next question about the Zion Inn, which is your immersive theater project. And I think this also brings up attachment and that feeling of safety, grounding into the feet, grounding into the legs, into that feeling of like, I belong and I'm allowed to be here kind of feeling as Jewish American therapists. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this in. You and I have had a lot of personal conversations around our experiences as Jewish clinicians, Jewish creative arts therapists, the lack of safety that we have felt in our field, especially in the months following, and now years following the outbreak of the war on October 7th, but also predating this. As you said, there was a gut knowing that something is not settling for me here, that there's a part of me that's not feeling visible or accepted or challenged, hinting to more, that unless you have experienced microaggressions because of the identities that you hold, you're probably not aware that it's even happening. And I think what you're describing is that you and I had these experiences for a long time where our bodies were telling us, even though it's not explicitly being said, something is not right. And there's something in the room that, if it were named, would challenge the status quo and would challenge the biases of most of the people present. And in this context was about our own identities as far as being Jewish and having connections to Israel. And what I'm also sensing in what you're describing in this presentation and in many academic spaces I've been in over the years, a kind of one-sided bias that inherently villainizes Israel. Often this is suggested as the Israeli government, but unfortunately this has become a societal phenomenon where it's actually all Israeli people and then thereby Jewish people or Zionists by association that are demonized or villainized. And it's become trendy and it's really dehumanizing and it's really binary inducing. And this is actually something we talked a lot about at the training this past weekend, the different types of societal invalidation that incur trauma. And how when there's a dismissal of someone's story and experience, this invalidation, whether it's through gaslighting, whether it's through, an erasure of lived experience, a rewriting of narrative, it's so harmful. And in contrast to what you're describing happening at that other Kint weekend where we were both like, there's something here that's not being talked about, but it doesn't quite feel like if we were to speak up, that would be fully heard or received or accepted. In contrast to that, this past weekend, I was actually able to name certain things that I'm still carrying, not feeling safe as a Jewish person in the world, and noticing how in the anti-Zionist movement, there has become a radicalization that feels violent and harmful to those that hold Jewish or Israeli or Zionist identities. I was able to name some of this and to actually feel like I was being received by the facilitators and at least energetically by the group. And that felt really important. Yeah. So I know that that's a really kind of long-winded to respond to what you said, but I wanted to also name some of the things that you were hinting at. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but we can also do, part 2 of this because I think it's really important, but just to touch on Zion and part of the reason for my wanting to create this space was to actually do and undo some of the things that we're talking about. So to create a space where we can enter as Jewish or Israeli or Zionist or Palestinian or allied individuals and be met with respect and dignity for the histories and the stories that we hold, and to actually connect through what society would otherwise try to deem as problematic or colonial or unacceptable, to actually say, hey, we can acknowledge that we all have shared histories and stories around this land and different relationships to Zion as a concept and as something that takes up space in the world and that has been charged and rewritten with meaning, not by those who hold true Indigenous and ancestral connections to all that it holds. We can meet each other here in this complex, nuanced, perhaps divergent space. We don't necessarily agree on everything here, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're setting a framework that necessitates shared respect and human dignity. And so it may not be guaranteed that there is safety. There may be ruptures that happen, but we're doing what we need to for our nervous systems and to connect together where we're mitigating that potential for harm and prioritizing the potential for connection.
So beautiful, really. And I loved going to the Zion Inn and I want to go back. It almost feels like a portal, like as if you're going back to an unknown time, like a year that just doesn't exist. And maybe it's because of the aesthetics that you have in there, the little details that you put into everything, the food, the sense of community, and this really like the space that you created. And it's very mindful and regulating, which for those who are new to this idea of regulating, you don't have to necessarily be calm right away to be regulated. It's like that's a misconception. It's more about like attuning to your present moment and feeling like even if I am afraid or nervous, I could go into this new place and that will help me regulate. It's not like we have to be these perfect. It's the opposite is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And you've created that space. Yeah, you've created that place to co-regulate with someone that you've never met before, which is obviously only something a very educated person could do. So,
Thank you for seeing that. And it meant so much to me that you joined one of our ends and to also, connect some of the dots between a lot of what we've been talking about throughout this conversation. It's a co-creation. It takes the willingness on part of the guests who arrive at the end to attend this immersive therapeutic theater evening, an openness to the possibility of connection and to exploration and experiencing. And so I can do what I can to set up the space and to provide those possibilities for somatic connection, attunement, grounding objects, embodied nourishment. And it takes an openness and a willingness on part of the participants to engage with it and a readiness. And that's something that I really try to highlight in the community agreement that guests are required to agree to before they even enter the space, that, there's a readiness to engage in this way. So it's asking guests to show up with a certain mindset that I can enter this space where I might be confronted or challenged with perspectives that I don't share. And the highlight is on the humanity in the room. And so as long as we can come back to that shared humanity, we're uplifting that possibility for human connection.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Atara. I feel so lucky to call you my friend and my colleague.
Likewise, I'm
Yeah.
always in awe and appreciation of you, Rebecca.
Yes. And so for those who want to find you and connect with you and work with you, where could they find you?
Thank you. So my practice is called Therapy Walks. So I'm not as active on the Instagram as some therapists are on social media, but we are on Instagram, therapy.walks. At therapy-walks. That's my psychotherapy private practice. And I work with individuals of all ages. I also work with groups and teams. Rebecca already highlighted, some of my specialties. You can read more about that, on my website as well. And if you're interested, given that we did land talking about the Zion Inn, if you're interested in learning more, you can also, if you're on Instagram, follow us at the.zion.in, which can also go in the show notes. And I can put my contact info there, in case you want to have a more personal conversation before deciding whether you're ready to enter the space or want to work together in some other capacity. So thank you for that invitation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. And hopefully to be continued. I feel like we planted a lot of seeds and touched on a lot of ground, and there's always more to come back to.
Definitely to be continued.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Atara Vogelstein for being here today. Atara's work is her warmth, her wisdom, the way she so fearlessly holds space in the therapy room, in the dance studio, and in community spaces like the Zion Inn. You could find the Zion Inn on Instagram at the.zion.in, like hotel. Links will be in the show notes. And if you want to connect with Atara as a therapist, you can head to therapy-walks.com or find her on Instagram. And thank you for listening. We will see you next time.